In-laws said I'd never be successful. I gifted them a mansion and left without a word. The last thing I expected to hear at my own wedding reception was my mother-in-law, Patricia, announcing to a table full of relatives that I was nothing but a dreamer who would drag their precious son David into poverty. But there she was, wine glass raised high, her voice carrying across the entire banquet hall as she declared, "Mark my words, this marriage won't last 2 years because Maya doesn't have what it takes to succeed at anything." I stood frozen behind the dessert table, my white wedding dress suddenly feeling like a costume I had no right to wear. The laughter that followed her comment felt like a slap across my face. But what hurt even more was seeing David just sitting there, saying absolutely nothing to defend me. His father Robert chimed in with his own cruel observation. "She's a sweet girl, but let's be realistic. She's 24 years old, with no real career prospects, and big dreams that will never amount to anything." My name is Maya Soren, and that humiliating moment at my wedding reception became the fuel that would drive me to build an empire worth over $50 million. But this story isn't just about money or success, it's about the sweet, calculated revenge I served to the people who underestimated me so completely that they forgot I was even capable of remembering their words. David and I had met during our final year of college at Northwestern University. He was studying business administration while I was pursuing a degree in computer science with a minor in entrepreneurship. From the very beginning, his parents made it clear that they considered me an unsuitable match for their son. Patricia worked as a real estate agent in their affluent suburb of Winnetka, while Robert owned a moderately successful accounting firm. They weren't wealthy by any means, but they carried themselves with the kind of pretentious air that made them believe they were entitled to look down on others. During our 2-year courtship, every family dinner became an interrogation about my career plans, my family's financial situation, and my realistic expectations for the future. Patricia would make pointed comments about how David deserved someone who could contribute meaningfully to their future together, while Robert would lecture me about the importance of practical career choices and understanding one's limitations. The worst part was that David never defended me during these conversations. He would sit there quietly, occasionally nodding along with his parents' observations, as if he agreed that I was indeed lacking in some fundamental way. When I confronted him about it privately, he would always say the same thing. "They're just protective of me, Maya. Once they see how successful you become, they'll change their minds." But I wasn't successful yet. I was a recent college graduate with a computer science degree, working as a junior developer at a small tech startup called Innovate Tech Solutions. My salary was barely enough to cover my student loan payments and living expenses in Chicago. I had big dreams of creating my own software company someday, but to David's parents, I was just another 20-something with unrealistic ambitions and no practical skills. The wedding planning process became a 6-month nightmare of passive-aggressive comments and thinly veiled insults. Patricia insisted on controlling every detail of the ceremony because, as she put it, Maya's family obviously can't afford the kind of wedding David deserves. She made snide remarks about my dress being too simple, my flower choices being budget-conscious, and my reception venue being adequate for someone with limited options. My own parents, who had immigrated to the United States from Taiwan when I was 5 years old, were hardworking people who owned a small restaurant in Chinatown. They had sacrificed everything to give me a good education, and hearing Patricia dismiss them as inadequate made my blood boil. But I bit my tongue because I loved David and believed that once we were married, his parents would eventually accept me. The wedding day itself was beautiful, despite all the family tension. I felt genuinely happy walking down the aisle toward David, convinced that we were starting a new chapter where love would triumph over his parents' disapproval. The ceremony went perfectly. The photographs were stunning, and for a few brief hours I actually believed that maybe Patricia and Robert would finally see me as part of their family. Then came the reception, and Patricia's public announcement that destroyed whatever naive optimism I had been clinging to. As I stood there behind the dessert table, listening to my new in-laws predict my failure to a room full of their friends and relatives, something inside me crystallized into cold, hard determination. They wanted to see what I was capable of. They were about to find out. The first year of marriage was challenging in ways I hadn't anticipated. David and I moved into a small one-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park, and while we were happy together, the constant financial pressure was exhausting. My job at Innovate Tech Solutions was demanding but not particularly well paid, and David was working as a junior analyst at a financial consulting firm for barely more than I was making. Every family gathering became an opportunity for Patricia and Robert to remind us and everyone else about our modest circumstances. They would make comments about our tiny apartment, our budget-friendly lifestyle choices, and our need to manage expectations about the future. Patricia developed a particularly annoying habit of bringing up successful couples she knew, always emphasizing how much money the wives were making in their practical careers. The Johnson's daughter just made partner at her law firm, she would announce during Sunday dinners. She's pulling in 6 figures now, which is exactly what you need in today's economy. It's so important to have realistic career goals. Or, Robert's colleague has a daughter who married a doctor. They just bought a house in Lake Forest. That's what happens when both spouses focus on careers that actually pay well. David would sit there nodding along with these observations, occasionally adding his own comments about the importance of financial stability and making smart career choices. It became increasingly clear that he agreed with his parents' assessment of me, even if he wasn't brave enough to say it directly to my face. But while they were busy criticizing my career prospects, I was working 18-hour days developing something that would change everything. During my time at Innovate Tech Solutions, I had identified a massive gap in the market for small business management software. Most existing platforms were either too expensive for small businesses or too complicated for non-technical users to navigate effectively. I spent every evening and weekend for 8 months developing a software platform called Business Bridge, an all-in-one solution that would allow small business owners to manage their inventory, track sales, handle payroll, and generate financial reports through a single user-friendly interface. The beauty of Business Bridge was its simplicity. I designed it specifically for people who didn't have technical backgrounds, but needed powerful tools to run their businesses efficiently. I funded the development entirely on my own, using my savings, credit cards, and even selling some of my jewelry to pay for server costs and software licenses. David knew I was working on some kind of side project, but he was so focused on his own career that he never asked for details. His parents, of course, dismissed it as another example of my impractical dreaming whenever David mentioned it. "Maya's always working on some computer thing," Patricia would say with a dismissive wave of her hand. "It's sweet that she has hobbies, but she really needs to focus on her actual job if she wants to contribute meaningfully to your household income." The breakthrough came in month 9 of development. I had been beta testing Business Bridge with 5 small businesses in Chicago, including my parents' restaurant, and the results were extraordinary. Every single business reported significant improvements in efficiency, cost savings, and revenue tracking. More importantly, they were all eager to continue using the software and willing to pay a monthly subscription fee for it. I knew I had something special, but I needed capital to scale the business properly. That's when I made the decision that would change my life forever. I quit my job at Innovate Tech Solutions and used my entire 401k savings to hire a small team of developers and start marketing Business Bridge to small businesses across the Midwest. David was horrified when I told him about my decision. "Maya, this is insane," he said, pacing around our tiny living room. "You can't just quit your job to chase some startup dream. What if this doesn't work out?" How are we going to pay our bills? When his parents found out, their reaction was even worse. Patricia called me irresponsible and selfish, while Robert lectured me about the importance of steady employment and not jeopardizing your husband's future for a fantasy. This is exactly what we were worried about, Patricia announced during what would be our last family dinner for quite some time. Maya's always been a dreamer, but now she's putting your financial security at risk, David. You need to put your foot down and make her get a real job before this gets completely out of hand. For the first time in our relationship, I looked David directly in the eyes and said, "If you don't believe in me, that's fine. But don't expect me to limit my potential because your parents are afraid of taking risks." The room fell silent. Robert cleared his throat and said, "Maya, we're not trying to be cruel, but statistics show that 90% of startups fail within the first year. You're gambling with your family's future, and that's not fair to David." "Then I guess we'll find out what I'm really capable of," I replied, standing up from the dinner table. "But I won't be coming to these family dinners anymore until I have something to prove to all of you." Patricia actually laughed, and said, "Honey, we'll be waiting for a very long time." That was the last conversation I had with David's parents for 3 years. Business Bridge launched officially 6 months later, and within the first quarter, we had over 500 small business subscribers paying monthly fees ranging from $99 to $299 depending on their package level. The software was everything I had hoped it would be: powerful, intuitive, and genuinely helpful for business owners who had been struggling with expensive, complicated alternatives. But the real explosion came when I added a feature that nobody else in the market was offering: integrated e-commerce functionality that allowed small businesses to set up online stores directly through the Business Bridge platform. Suddenly, local restaurants, boutiques, service providers, and craftspeople could manage their entire business operations and sell their products online through a single platform. The timing was perfect. This was 2019, just before the pandemic would force thousands of small businesses to pivot to online sales in order to survive. Business Bridge became the lifeline that helped hundreds of businesses not just survive, but actually thrive during one of the most challenging economic periods in recent history. By the end of our second year, we had over 10,000 subscribers and annual revenue of $15 million. I hired a team of 50 employees, moved the company into a beautiful office space in downtown Chicago, and started getting attention from major tech publications and industry analysts. During this entire period, David watched my success with a mixture of pride and bewilderment. He was happy for me, but I could tell that he was also struggling with the fact that I was now earning more money in a month than he made in an entire year. Our relationship began to strain under the pressure of my demanding schedule and his growing insecurity about our income disparity. The worst part was that he still wouldn't defend me to his parents. Even as Business Bridge continued to grow and attract national attention, Patricia and Robert maintained their position that I was getting lucky with a fad, and that my success wouldn't last. "Anyone can make money during a boom period," Robert would tell David during their weekly phone calls. "The real test is whether she can sustain this when the market corrects itself." Patricia was even more dismissive. "She's probably just riding the wave of other people's hard work. These tech companies are all smoke and mirrors anyway." David would relay these conversations to me with a helpless shrug, as if his parents' opinions were weather patterns that we simply had to endure. He never once told them to stop criticizing me, or suggested that maybe they owed me an apology for their previous predictions about my failure. By year 3, Business Bridge had become the leading small business management platform in North America. We had over 25,000 subscribers, annual revenue of $42 million, and interest from several major corporations who wanted to acquire the company. I was featured on the cover of Entrepreneur magazine, invited to speak at technology conferences, and recognized as one of Forbes's 30 under 30 inches entrepreneurs to watch. More importantly, I had created something that was genuinely making a difference in people's lives. Small business owners would send me letters and emails describing how Business Bridge had helped them increase their profits, streamline their operations, and spend more time with their families instead of drowning in paperwork. I was particularly proud of the fact that over 60% of our subscribers were women-owned businesses and minority-owned enterprises that had previously struggled to access the tools they needed to compete effectively. But despite all of this success, David's parents continued to minimize my achievements and predict my eventual failure. They had moved from criticizing my lack of career prospects to criticizing my work-life balance, my obsession with money, and my failure to settle down and focus on starting a family. The breaking point came during Christmas dinner 2022. David and I had been invited to Patricia and Robert's house for the first time in 3 years, and I naively believed that maybe they were finally ready to acknowledge my success and welcome me into the family. I was completely wrong. The dinner conversation started pleasantly enough, with polite questions about the business and generic compliments about my impressive growth. But as the evening progressed and the wine flowed more freely, Patricia's true feelings began to surface. "Of course, we all know that this kind of success never lasts," she said, refilling her glass for the 4th time. "Maya's had a good run, but these tech bubbles always burst eventually. The smart thing would be to sell the company now while people are still interested and focus on building a stable, normal life." Robert nodded in agreement. "Exactly. There's something to be said for knowing when to quit while you're ahead. Maya's proven she can build something, but sustaining it long-term requires different skills entirely." I felt my jaw clench, but I tried to keep my voice level. "Business Bridge isn't a bubble, Robert. We're profitable, growing steadily, and providing real value to thousands of businesses. This isn't some speculative venture, it's a sustainable company with a proven business model." Patricia waved her hand dismissively. "That's what everyone says right before everything falls apart. David, you need to help Maya understand that it's time to cash out and move on to something more realistic." The room fell silent as everyone waited to see how David would respond. This was his moment to finally stand up for me, to defend the woman he had married and the success she had built through years of hard work and determination. Instead, he looked down at his plate and said quietly, "Maybe they have a point, Maya. You've accomplished so much already. Maybe it would be smart to consider your options." That was the moment I realized my marriage was over. I excused myself from the dinner table, drove home to our apartment, and spent the entire night making plans that would change everything. By morning, I had made 3 life-altering decisions. I was going to divorce David, I was going to sell Business Bridge, and I was going to use the proceeds to teach his parents the most expensive lesson of their lives. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly amicable. David knew he had failed me as a husband, and he didn't contest any of my terms. I kept the business, the apartment, and most of our shared assets. He moved back in with his parents temporarily, which turned out to be perfect for what I had planned. The acquisition of Business Bridge moved quickly once I signaled my interest in selling. 3 major corporations entered a bidding war for the company, and the final sale price was $57 million. After taxes and paying out my employees' profit-sharing bonuses, I walked away with $38 million in cash. But the money was just the beginning of my revenge plan. I spent the next 6 months quietly researching Patricia and Robert's financial situation, their dreams, their insecurities, and their deepest desires. It turned out that they had been struggling financially for years, despite their pretentious attitude. Robert's accounting firm was losing clients to larger competitors, and Patricia's real estate career had never recovered from the 2008 housing crisis. More importantly, I discovered that they had been dreaming of owning a mansion in Lake Forest for over 20 years. Patricia had a folder full of real estate listings and magazine clippings featuring the exact style of house she wanted: a Georgian colonial with at least 6 bedrooms, a 3-car garage, a swimming pool, and grounds large enough for entertaining. That's when I found it. 847 Sheridan Road in Lake Forest, Illinois. A stunning Georgian colonial mansion with 7 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a gourmet kitchen, a library, a home theater, a wine cellar, a 3-car garage, and 3 acres of perfectly landscaped grounds. The asking price was $3.2 million. I bought it with cash under the name of a shell corporation I had created specifically for this purpose. Then I hired the most expensive interior design firm in Chicago to furnish the entire house exactly the way Patricia had always described her dream home. I spent another $400,000 on furniture, artwork, window treatments, and decorative accessories. Every room was photographed for a luxury home magazine spread, and the results were absolutely breathtaking. The final step was the most satisfying. I had custom stationery created with the mansion's address and wrote a letter that I had been composing in my head for 3 years. Asterisk, Dear Patricia and Robert. Asterisk, 3 years ago, you told me I would never be successful. You predicted that my marriage to David wouldn't last 2 years because I didn't have what it takes to succeed at anything. You were half right, the marriage didn't last, but not for the reasons you anticipated. Asterisk. I wanted to show you what I'm actually capable of achieving when I'm not wasting my energy trying to prove myself to people who had already decided I wasn't worth their respect. Asterisk. This house is yours. The deed is being transferred to your names, and all property taxes are paid for the next 5 years. Consider it a wedding gift that's about 3 years overdue. Asterisk. I hope you enjoy living in your dream home. I certainly enjoyed buying it for you. Asterisk. Best wishes for your future. Asterisk Maya Soren. Asterisk. P.S. You were right about one thing. I do know when to quit while I'm ahead. I had the letter delivered by courier on a Tuesday morning in March, along with the property deed, house keys, and a folder containing professional photographs of every room in the mansion. Then I did something that I had been planning for months. I disappeared. I had already purchased a beautiful house in Asheville, North Carolina, under a different name, and started a new business developing educational software for children with learning disabilities. My new life was quieter, more purposeful, and completely free from people who felt entitled to diminish my accomplishments. David called me approximately 30 times that first day, leaving increasingly frantic voicemails begging me to contact him. Patricia and Robert drove to the mansion that afternoon to confirm that it was real, then spent the next week trying to figure out how to reach me. Through mutual friends, I heard that they were completely stunned by the gesture. They moved into the house within a month, and according to everyone who knew them, they couldn't stop talking about my incredible generosity and how they had always known I had tremendous potential. The irony was delicious. 6 months later, David finally tracked down my new address and drove to North Carolina to see me in person. He arrived at my house on a Saturday morning, looking exhausted and defeated. "Maya, I know I don't deserve to ask you for anything," he said, standing on my front porch like a stranger. "But I need to understand why you did this. Why did you give my parents a $3 million house after everything they put you through?" I looked at this man I had once loved enough to marry, and I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, no regret, just complete indifference. Because I wanted them to understand exactly what they lost when they decided I wasn't worth their respect, I said calmly. Every time they walk through that house, every time they entertain their friends in those beautiful rooms, every time they look out at those perfectly landscaped grounds, they'll remember that the woman they dismissed as a failure bought them their dream home with pocket change. David stared at me for a long moment, then said quietly, "You're right. We all underestimated you completely. Yes, you did. But the difference is that I never needed your validation to know what I was capable of achieving. I just needed you to get out of my way so I could do it." He left that afternoon, and I haven't seen or spoken to him since. That was 2 years ago. My new business is thriving. I'm engaged to a wonderful man who believes in my dreams and supports my ambitions, and I wake up every morning in a house that I bought because I loved it, not because I was trying to prove anything to anyone. I heard through the grapevine that Patricia and Robert still live in the mansion, and that they've become much more humble about discussing other people's career prospects. Apparently, Patricia now tells everyone she meets about her incredibly successful former daughter-in-law, and how she always knew Maya would accomplish great things. The most satisfying part of this entire story isn't the money I made, or the business I built, or even the revenge I orchestrated. It's the fact that I learned to trust my own judgment completely and never again allowed other people's limitations to become my limitations. David's parents taught me an invaluable lesson, though I doubt they intended to. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. They showed me that they were small-minded people who needed to diminish others in order to feel better about themselves. I believed them, and I planned accordingly. The mansion in Lake Forest serves as a daily reminder to them that success isn't about meeting other people's expectations or conforming to their narrow definitions of what's possible. It's about having the courage to pursue your vision even when everyone around you is predicting your failure. Sometimes the best revenge isn't proving people wrong, it's succeeding so completely that their opinions become irrelevant. And sometimes, if you're feeling particularly generous, you can buy them a mansion just to make sure they never forget exactly how wrong they were about you. I hope this story inspires anyone who has ever been told they're not capable of achieving their dreams. The people who doubt you today might be living in the house you buy them tomorrow if you're feeling charitable enough to give them that gift. Trust your instincts, believe in your vision, and never let anyone convince you to settle for less than what you know you're capable of becoming. Sometimes the best way to silence your critics is to succeed so loudly that they can't help but hear you.